I was standing at the door of the house I helped design, holding the phone so hard my fingers went white. On the other end of the line, my father's secretary's voice sounded mechanical, almost robotic. "Mr. Harris is in Hawaii and will not be able to attend the funeral. He will send flowers." Flowers. My mother was dead, and all he offered were flowers. I hung up without replying. The rain was starting to fall over Portland, and I watched the drops run down the window glass like tears I could not shed. My wife appeared behind me, placing her hand on my shoulder, but I barely felt the touch. I was numb, floating somewhere between anger and shock. My mother was only 58. 58. The doctor said it was a sudden heart attack, that she did not suffer, that it was quick. As if that made everything easier. As if the speed of death mattered when you lose the only person who truly knew you your whole life. 3 days earlier, we had spoken on the phone. She sounded tired, but not ill. We talked about my son's birthday, about how he was growing too fast, about the new house I was designing on the coast. Normal things. Everyday things. There was no sign it would be the last time I heard her voice. Now she was in a closed coffin, because my father insisted it be so. I couldn't even say goodbye properly. The funeral was on a rainy Tuesday. The church was full of people who loved my mother, people whose lives she had touched with her quiet kindness. She was an art teacher at a local school, known for believing in students no one else believed in. She had a garden full of daisies that she tended to more lovingly than most people tended to their own children. And where was my father? On a beach in Hawaii with a woman 20 years younger than him. I stood at the pulpit, looking out over that sea of sad faces, and tried to find words. My throat was closed, my chest heavy as concrete. I began to speak about memories, about how she taught me to draw when I was 6, how she supported my decision to become an architect when my father wanted me to go into the family real estate business. But I couldn't finish. The words were lost, swallowed by a wave of pain so intense I thought I would drown right there, in front of everyone. I returned to the pew beside my wife. My 7-year-old son looked at me with those confused eyes, trying to understand why his father was crying. I held his small warm hand, and it was the only thing that kept me from running out of that church. After the funeral, people came up to me with their condolences, their awkward hugs, their hollow promises that time would heal everything. I smiled politely, thanked them, pretended their words meant something. But inside, I boiled. I boiled with anger at the man who should have been there, standing by my side, sharing this pain. When I finally managed to be alone in my mother's office, I searched for answers I didn't even know what they were. She had always been organized, meticulous. Every paper had its place, every bill was paid on time. But something was different. Piles of legal documents scattered across the desk, hurried notes in the margins, numbers underlined hard. I picked up an envelope that was set apart from the others. Inside were property records, title transfers, documents my mother had refused to sign. Documents my father was trying to force her to authorize. That's when I saw the dates. The threats began 6 months ago. Late-night calls she had written down in a notebook hidden in the drawer. Text messages she had printed and kept. My father wasn't just being distant or cruel. He was pressuring my mother to give up everything she had. My stomach churned. Could it be possible that that heart attack wasn't so sudden after all? Could it be possible that the stress, the pressure, the constant threats had? No. I was being paranoid. Grief does strange things to people's minds. It makes you see conspiracies where there is only coincidence. But then my phone vibrated. It was a message. From my mother's cell phone. My heart stopped. For a full second I couldn't breathe. I looked at the screen as if it would burn my hand. The message had only 6 words, but they changed everything. I'm not dead. Come to the grave now. I let the phone drop. It hit the wooden floor with a dull sound that echoed through the silent office. My vision blurred. The room spun. This was impossible. Completely impossible. I had just left her funeral. I saw the coffin being carried to the cemetery. I watched the earth begin to cover it. I picked up the phone again with trembling hands. Read the message again. And again. The words did not change. Did not disappear. Someone was playing with me. It had to be that. Some sort of cruel, sick prank. Maybe my father had access to her phone and was trying to manipulate me in some twisted way. But what if it wasn't? What if, by some impossible miracle, for some reason I could not understand, that message was real. I looked out the window. It was night already, the rain falling harder now, turning the streets into dark rivers. The cemetery was 20 minutes away. 20 minutes to find out whether I was losing my mind or whether something beyond my understanding was happening. I grabbed the car keys without thinking twice. My wife asked where I was going, but I couldn't answer. How do you explain something you don't even understand yourself? I drove through the wet streets like an automaton. My mind wouldn't process coherent thoughts, only fragments of impossible possibilities. The rain hit the windshield so hard the wipers could barely keep up. When I arrived at the cemetery, the gate was open. It shouldn't have been. It was past 10 at night, and the place closed at sunset. But there it was, wide open, as if it had been waiting for me. I stepped out of the car and felt the cold rain soak my clothes in seconds. I didn't care. I began walking among the headstones, searching for the fresh grave, for the newly turned earth. My steps sank into the mud. The wind howled through the trees, carrying dead leaves in ghostly whirlwinds. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound made me jump. And then I saw her. A figure standing by my mother's grave. Small, hunched against the wind, wearing a dark coat with the hood up. My heart raced. I ran, stumbling over roots and stones, not caring about the mud splashing on my clothes. When I got close enough, the figure turned. She lowered the hood. And I saw my mother's face. Alive. Breathing. Real. My knees gave out. I almost fell right there, in the mud and rain. She took a step forward, and I saw tears running down her face, mixing with the rain. "My son," she said, and her voice was exactly as I remembered, hoarse with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for all of this." I could not speak. Could not move. My brain simply refused to process what was happening. "I know this seems crazy," she continued, taking another step toward me. "I know you must be wondering if you've gone mad, if you're dreaming. But I promise I will explain everything. Just, please don't scream. Don't call anyone. Not yet." Finally, my voice returned, broken and strange. How is this possible?" She looked around, nervous, as if expecting someone to appear from the shadows at any moment. "Not here. Not now. It's dangerous for us to be exposed too long. But I needed you to know the truth before it was too late." "Too late for what?" "To protect you. To protect your son. To protect everything that still matters." Her hand reached for mine, and the touch was real warm, solid. Not a ghost. Not a hallucination. "Your father," she whispered, and there was genuine fear in her eyes. "He is not the man you think you know. And if I hadn't disappeared, if I hadn't faked my own death, he would have killed me for real." The world spun. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed about my family, about my life, began to collapse like a house of cards in a storm. "He threatened you?" She nodded, squeezing my hand tightly. "He threatened. Stalked. Said that if I didn't sign the papers, if I didn't hand over everything that was mine, he would make it look like an accident. And I believed him. Because," her voice faltered, "because he had done it before." I felt the blood run cold in my veins. "What?" "Your grandparents. Their car accident 20 years ago. It wasn't an accident." Each revelation was a bomb exploding inside my chest. Each word rewrote my entire history. "I have proof," she continued quickly. "I have records, recordings, documents. But I needed to be sure you were safe before I acted. I needed him to think he had one, that I was out of the way." I looked at the grave behind her, at the earth that should have held my mother's body, but that was probably empty or had some substitute I didn't even want to imagine. "What do we do now?" She looked into my eyes, and I saw something I had never seen before: absolute determination, contained fury, a thirst for justice. "Now, my son, we make him pay for everything." If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. We spent the whole night in a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where nobody asks questions and the security cameras haven't worked in years. My mother had chosen the place carefully, every detail planned as if her life depended on it. And maybe it did. She spread documents across the stained bed, piles of papers that told a story I never imagined could exist. Financial records, suspicious bank transfers, audio recordings on an old cell phone. Each piece of evidence was a brick building a wall of horror that separated the father I thought I knew from the monster he really was. "It started 3 years ago," she said, her voice low but steady. "When your father discovered that I'd kept some properties in my name, an inheritance from my parents. He always knew they existed, but never cared because he thought he could control everything anyway." I picked up one of the documents. It was an appraisal of coastal land, areas worth millions now because of recent development. "So he decided he wanted it all for himself?" "It wasn't just greed," she replied, running her hand through her gray hair I'd never seen loose before. She always wore it up, elegant, controlled. Now it was wild, free. It was about power. About reminding me who was in charge, who had control. When I refused to sign, he changed. Changed how? She turned on the old phone and played a recording. My father's voice echoed in the small, cold room, icy and calculated. "You're going to sign those papers, or you'll regret it. Accidents happen, darling. You know that better than anyone." My stomach churned. That wasn't the voice of the man who used to take me fishing as a kid, who taught me to ride a bike, who attended every one of my school performances. It was the voice of a stranger. A predator. "There's more," she said, skipping ahead in the recording. "Another conversation, this one even more disturbing. Your parents learned too late not to play games with me. Do you want the same fate?" My throat tightened. He killed my grandparents?" My mother nodded, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. "I always suspected. The accident was too convenient. They had discovered your father was embezzling funds from a joint project and planned to expose him. A week later, the brakes on their car failed on a mountain road. Why didn't you ever say anything? Why stay with him all those years?" She looked at me with an expression that mixed shame and despair. "Because I was afraid. Because he convinced me that no one would believe me. Because I had you to protect, and he always made it clear that if I ever tried anything, you would pay the price." Every word was a knife to my chest. To think I grew up hugging the man who terrorized my mother, who murdered my grandparents, who built an empire on blood and lies. "The nurse who helped you," I asked, trying to change the subject before the rage consumed me completely. "How did you convince her?" "She didn't need much convincing," my mother answered with a bitter smile. "Your father fired her husband 2 years ago for reporting illegal labor practices. They lost their house, almost everything. When I explained my situation, she saw a chance to help, and to get some justice of her own." "And the body? What's in the coffin?" "Equivalent weight in sandbags wrapped in sheets. The nurse forged the death certificate, altered the records. It cost every cent of my secret savings, but it was worth it." I looked out the motel's dirty window. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Blood and fire, I thought. Fitting. What do we do with all this? Take it to the police. My mother shook her head. Your father has contacts everywhere, politicians in his pocket, police chiefs who owe him favors, judges he helped get elected. If we go now without a solid plan, he'll bury everything and destroy us in the process. Then what's the plan? She grabbed another envelope, thicker than the others. I know a lawyer. She specializes in corporate and financial crimes. She owes your father nothing. In fact, he tried to ruin her career years ago for refusing to take part in one of his schemes. She'll know how to use this evidence properly. I took the envelope and began examining its contents. They were records of money laundering, bribery schemes, evidence of fraud in government contracts. My father wasn't just an abusive husband and possibly a murderer, he was a criminal on an industrial scale. This will destroy everything, I murmured. The company, our reputation, our name. The name is already destroyed, she shot back firmly. It was built on lies and blood. Better to let it fall and start something new, something clean. She was right. I knew she was. But the weight of it all, the magnitude of the betrayal, was almost too much to bear. My wife and my son, I said suddenly. Are they in danger? I don't think so. Your father always had a weakness for them. It's the only reason you were free to follow your own path, to stay out of his business. But still, we have to be careful. I spent the next few hours absorbing information after information. Each document revealed another layer of corruption: shell companies, offshore accounts, payments to public officials. My father had built a criminal empire so elaborate it would take years to dismantle completely. But something didn't fit. Why is he in Hawaii right now? Why not come back for the funeral, even to pretend to be grieving? My mother tensed. That's another thing. He's not just on vacation. He's there to close a big deal, one that involves selling several properties, including mine. But without my signature on the documents, the deal is at risk of collapsing. That's why he was so confident I'd be dead, that the automatic succession papers would take effect. How long until that happens? Legally, he'd have to wait for probate, but knowing your father, he's already forged something to speed it up. I'd say we have a week, maybe less. A week. 7 days to gather allies, build an irrefutable case, and bring down the man who was supposed to protect us. My phone rang, making me jump. It was my wife. I answered with a trembling hand. Where are you? I'm worried. You left last night and didn't come back. I'm dealing with some things, I said carefully. Things related to my mother. I'll explain everything soon, I promise. Your father called, she said, and I felt my blood run cold. He wanted to know if you were okay, said he tried to reach you but couldn't. He sounded concerned. Of course he did. My father had always been an exceptional actor. How many times had he faked affection while feeling only contempt? How many times had he smiled while plotting destruction? What did you tell him? That you were grieving in your own way, that you needed space. He said he understands, that he'll be back in a few days. Good. Don't tell him where I am or what I'm doing. It's important. There was a pause on the other end. You're scaring me, love. What's going on? You'll know soon. Please just trust me. I hung up before she could ask more questions. My mother was watching me, her expression tense. He knows something's wrong, she said. He's always had a sixth sense for these things. We need to move fast. We spent the rest of the day planning. We decided I would contact the lawyer and arrange a discreet meeting. My mother would stay hidden, guarding the original evidence while we made copies of everything. That afternoon, I made the call. The lawyer answered on the third ring. I need to talk to you about my father, I began bluntly. And about crimes he's committed. I have proof. There was a long silence on the other end. Your father is a powerful man. Are you sure you want to go down this path? I'm sure I can't keep living knowing what I know and doing nothing. Then let's talk. But not at my office, it's too risky. We arranged to meet the following night, in a public but discreet restaurant. Crowded places are safer than empty ones, she explained. More witnesses, harder to control the narrative. When I hung up, for the first time in 24 hours, I felt something like hope. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be quick. But maybe, just maybe, justice was still possible. My mother took my hand. Thank you for believing me. For not judging the choice I made. You did what you had to do to survive. There's no judgment in that. She smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. There's a price to exposing the truth. We'll lose things. People will judge us, question why we waited so long. The media will turn our tragedy into entertainment. Let them, I replied with new conviction. At least it'll be our truth, not his lies. That night, lying on the motel's uncomfortable bed, staring at the stained ceiling, I thought about everything I'd lost in the last 48 hours. Innocence. Faith in family. The image of the man I called father. But I had gained something too. The certainty that my mother was stronger than I'd ever imagined. The determination to do what was right, no matter the cost. And the understanding that sometimes, loving someone means destroying the lies that protect them, even when it hurts. The restaurant was discreet, hidden on a side street in downtown Portland. The kind of place that looks insignificant from the outside, but is frequented by people who know real food. I arrived 15 minutes early, as the lawyer had instructed, and sat at a corner table with a clear view of all the exits. She arrived promptly at 7. Tall in her 40s, dark hair pulled into a flawless bun. She wore a gray suit that screamed competence and no jewelry beyond a simple watch. Her eyes swept the room with the same efficiency I used to evaluate architectural plans, noting every detail, every potential threat. "Charlotte Wells," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "Thank you for coming." She sat and got straight to the point. "Your father tried to destroy my career 7 years ago. I was working on a real estate fraud case, and suddenly all my witnesses disappeared, documents vanished, and I was accused of professional misconduct. It took me 3 years to clear my name." "And yet you agreed to meet me?" "Exactly because of that. I spent years waiting for a chance to expose who he really is. If you have what you say you have, that chance has finally arrived." I slid a thick envelope across the table. She opened it discreetly, examining only the first few pages before closing it again. "This is enough to start a federal investigation. But we need more." "More?" "There are records of money laundering, bribery, fraud." "I know. And it's solid. But your father will hire the best lawyers money can buy. They'll challenge the origin of this evidence, claim it was obtained illegally, argue that documents could be forged. We need something irrefutable, something even the best lawyer can't discredit." "Like what?" "Witnesses. People willing to speak. And we need him confessing on a recording, ideally without knowing he's being recorded." I thought of the recording my mother had, the veiled threats. "My mother has some recordings of him." Charlotte shook her head. "They're not enough. They're from a wife to a husband, in private conversations. A competent lawyer would argue they were taken out of context, that they were normal marital arguments exaggerated by emotion. We need him talking about the specific crimes, preferably to someone he believes is an ally." "You want me to use a hidden microphone?" "I want you to be smart about it. How long until your father returns from Hawaii?" 4 days. "Then we have 4 days to prepare. You'll meet with him, pretend you're emotionally shattered by your mother's death, vulnerable. Suggest that you might be ready to reconsider joining the family business, taking her place. Men like your father can't resist an opportunity to consolidate power." The idea made me nauseous, but I saw the logic. "And during these conversations, I'll try to get him to talk about the crimes?" "Exactly. But it has to be natural. You can't seem like you're fishing for information. You need to make it appear that you admire his intelligence, that you want to learn from the master." I spent the next 3 days preparing like I had never prepared for anything in my life. Charlotte trained me in covert interrogation techniques, teaching me to subtly guide conversations, to ask the right questions without seeming like I was asking questions. Meanwhile, my mother stayed hidden, but not inactive. She contacted people who had been harmed by my father over the years. The wife of the unfairly fired employee. A former partner forced to sell his share for a fraction of its value. An accountant who knew too much and had been threatened into silence. One by one, they agreed to cooperate. Each story I heard added another layer of horror to the image I had of my father. He wasn't just a criminal, he was systematic, calculating, destroying lives as if discarding old papers. "There's a pattern," Charlotte explained as we reviewed all the testimonies. "He identifies threats early, acts preemptively, and always leaves someone else to take the fall if something goes wrong. He's methodical." "How do we prove my grandparents' murder? It's been 20 years. "That's the hardest. But I found something interesting. The mechanic who examined the car after the accident is still alive. Lives in a small town inland. I called him yesterday. My heart raced. And he said he always knew it wasn't an accident. That the brakes were sabotaged, that anyone with basic knowledge would see it. But when he tried to include this in the report, he was visited by 2 men who made very clear that it would be better for his health to keep his mouth shut." "Will he testify?" "He's scared, but he's old now, tired of carrying this secret. If we ensure proper protection, I think he will." Then my phone rang. It was my father. Charlotte signaled for me to answer and turned on a portable recorder. "Son," his voice was soft, paternal. "Nauseating. I arrived early from Hawaii. I couldn't stay away knowing you were suffering." "Father," I forced emotion into my voice. It wasn't hard, I really was emotional, just not the way he thought. "Thank you for coming back. Shall we have dinner tomorrow? We need to talk about many things. About your mother, about the future, about the family." "I'd like that." "Great. 8 o'clock, at the club." And son? I missed you. I hung up, bile rising in my throat. Charlotte turned off the recorder. You did well. Tomorrow is the time. I'll equip you with a miniature, undetectable microphone. Just remember, don't be aggressive, don't make accusations. Be the lost son seeking guidance. I spent that night mentally rehearsing every possible scenario. What to do if he suspected. How to react if he confessed everything immediately. How to stay calm if he said something about my mother that made me want to smash a plate over his head. In the morning, I went to my mother's hideout. She was thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes, but her gaze shone with determination. Today's the day, I said. I know. I wish I could be there, but my presence would complicate everything. When this is over, you'll be able to live again. For real. She cupped my face with both hands. You've become a better man than anyone had the right to expect, considering who your father was. I'm proud of you. I learned from the right person. At 7:30, Charlotte equipped me with a microphone. It was tiny, sewn inside the seam of my shirt, completely invisible. Take a deep breath, she instructed. Remember the script. And if something goes wrong, if you feel you're in real danger, there's a panic button on your watch. Press twice, and we'll have people there in minutes. I arrived at the club at 8 on the dot. My father was already there, seated at his preferred table, a scotch in hand. When he saw me, he smiled, and for a second I almost believed it was genuine. My son, he stood and hugged me. I had to force myself not to recoil. You look tired. I haven't been sleeping well. Understandable. Losing your mother was a shock to all of us. Did he really believe his own lies? Or was it all calculated performance? We sat and ordered food. He spoke about Hawaii, about needing that time to process the loss. Every word was poison wrapped in honey. I thought a lot about the future during that trip, he said, swirling his glass. About the company, about legacy. Your mother always wanted you to stay away from the business, to follow your own dreams. She supported me a lot. I know. And I respected that. But now, well, things have changed. The company needs fresh blood, someone I can trust completely. Here it was. The opening. You're offering me a position? I'm offering a partnership. Vice president, with a direct path to eventually take over everything. You have the last name, you have the intelligence, you just need to learn the business. And what about Mom's properties? How does that work legally? He gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. That's being handled. There are ways to expedite probate processes when you know the right people. Right people. Judges, registrars, bureaucrats who understand that efficiency has its price. Your grandfather taught me that a long time ago. My heart raced. He was casually admitting corruption, as if it were normal. My grandparents, I ventured. Were you close to them? Something changed in his expression. Harder, colder. Your grandfather was an idealist. Thought business could be conducted with pure ethics. He was wrong. Wrong how? Wrong to think he could expose me without consequences. Wrong to forget that in this world, son, only the strong survive, those strong enough to do what's necessary. My hand trembled as I picked up the glass. He was practically confessing. Their accident was convenient for you, then? He studied me for a long moment, and for one terrible second, I thought I'd gone too far. But then he smiled. Accidents are interesting. Sometimes they happen naturally. Sometimes they need a little push. The important thing is to make sure they appear completely natural. Done. It was recorded. Clear confession. But he wasn't finished. Your mother never understood this. Thought she could challenge me, threaten me with papers and morality. She forgot who I was, what I was capable of. You threatened her? I gave her choices. She chose wrong. Fortunately, nature solved the problem before I had to take more direct measures. I felt anger boiling inside me, threatening to explode. Charlotte had warned me about this, about keeping control. More direct measures, I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. Like the ones you took with my grandparents? He leaned forward, his eyes meeting mine. Exactly like those. And you know the best part? No one ever suspected. Because I was careful, meticulous. That's what separates ordinary men from extraordinary men. It had everything. More than Charlotte could have dreamed. Confessions of homicide, admissions of corruption, documented threats. So you're teaching me, I said carefully, that to achieve real success, sometimes we have to cross lines? He smiled, proud. Now you're beginning to understand. We'll do great things together, son. We'll build an empire no one will dare challenge. I forced a smile, bile rising in my throat. I can't wait to get started. I left the club with my legs shaking so much I had to lean on the car for a full minute before I could get in. My hands were sweating, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would explode. But I had the recording. I had the full confession. I drove straight to Charlotte's office. She was waiting with 2 federal agents, a man and a woman with serious expressions that screamed FBI without needing badges. Did you get it? Charlotte asked before I even sat down. I only nodded, still unable to speak. I handed over the recording device. They played it, and the silence in the office was absolute as my father's voice echoed, confessing murder, corruption, threats. When it finished, the female agent looked to her partner. It's enough. We can move today. Today? My voice finally returned. Don't you need more time to prepare? We've been ready for 3 days, the agent replied. Charlotte gave us the preliminary evidence last week. We were just waiting for something irrefutable to justify the operation. This is more than irrefutable. Charlotte turned to me. We need to bring your mother now. She's going to be central to the case. A living witness to an attempted homicide, a victim of years of abuse and coercion. She's ready. But what about my family? My wife and my son? We'll put protection on them immediately. Your father won't have a chance to get near them. The next hours were a blur of frantic activity. They brought my mother from her hideout in an unmarked car. When she entered the office, the agents were visibly surprised. After all, they were looking at a woman who was officially dead. Mrs. Harris, the agent introduced herself. Or should I say, the late Mrs. Harris. I'll need your full statement about everything that happened. My mother sat, composed despite obvious exhaustion, and began to tell everything. Every threat, every moment of terror, every reason that led her to take the desperate decision to fake her own death. Her voice never wavered, even when tears streamed down her face. Meanwhile, I learned we weren't the only ones working against my father. The FBI had opened an investigation 6 months earlier, based on anonymous reports of tax irregularities. But they kept hitting walls, witnesses who refused to speak, documents that vanished, investigators who were suddenly transferred. Your father has a well-oiled system, the agent explained. But every system has a breaking point. You and your mother are that point. At 3 in the morning, the plan was complete. They would execute search and seizure warrants simultaneously at 6 locations: my father's mansion, his main offices, 2 secondary properties, and the offices of 2 lawyers who knew too much. The arrests would happen at 6 a.m. Do you want to be there? Charlotte asked. When they arrest him? I thought for a long moment. Part of me wanted to see it, to witness the moment the all-powerful man discovered he wasn't so powerful after all. But another part, the part that still remembered riding bikes with him in the park, couldn't face it. No. I need to be with my family when it happens. They'll see the news, and I need to explain before the media turns it into a circus. At 5 in the morning, I went home for the first time in days. My wife was awake. She clearly hadn't slept. When she saw me, she ran and hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. Where have you been? What's happening? Your father called 3 times last night saying you 2 had dinner and that you seemed strange. I sat with her on the bed and told her everything. Every horrible detail, every revelation. She listened in silence, her face passing through shock, horror, disbelief, and finally understanding. Your mother is alive, she repeated, as if testing the words. She faked her own death. To survive. To protect us. And now the truth comes out. All of it. My son woke at 6:15. 15 minutes after the arrest had happened, although I still didn't know the details. He came down the stairs rubbing his eyes, carrying his favorite stuffed bear. Dad, you're back. Where's Grandma? I thought she went to heaven. My heart broke and mended at the same time. I knelt in front of him. Grandma is okay, champ. She'll see you soon. But first, Daddy needs to tell you a story. I tried to simplify, to make it understandable for a 7-year-old. I explained that sometimes people we love do bad things, and when that happens, we have to be brave enough to do what's right, even when it hurts. Did Grandpa do bad things? He asked, confused. Yes. Very bad things. But he always gives me presents. Do bad people give presents? Bad people can look good on the outside. That's why we have to pay attention to people's actions, not just appearances. My phone rang. It was Charlotte. It's done. Your father was arrested at 6:03, without resistance. He was having coffee when we came in. He tried to call 3 different lawyers before realizing we'd seized their phones too. How did he react? With silence. Complete silence. He neither denied nor confessed. He just asked for a lawyer and refused to speak. But it doesn't matter. The evidence speaks for itself. And the others? His partners, the people involved. 10 arrests in total. 2 lawyers, 3 executives, 1 judge, and several minor facilitators. We dismantled the entire network at once. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't known I was carrying. How long until this goes public? The first press conference is scheduled for 10 a.m. Prepare yourself. It will be intense. She was right. At 11 my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, acquaintances, old clients, all wanting statements, answers, a piece of the story that was already spreading like wildfire. Real estate tycoon arrested for homicide and massive fraud, one headline read. Empire built on blood and lies collapses, said another. And the one that got the most attention, woman returns from the dead to bring down killer husband. The media had found out about my mother. I don't know how, probably a leak from someone at the FBI, but now her face was everywhere. Old photos of her, speculation about how she faked her death, conspiracy theories about everything. Charlotte called again at noon. Your mother will need to give an official statement. The prosecution wants to present her publicly to establish credibility before the defense tries to discredit everything as a fraud. Is she ready? She says she is. But it would be good if you were there. The press conference was set for 4 in the afternoon. The hall was packed with reporters, cameras, flashes that turned everything into a surreal nightmare. I stayed in the wings, watching my mother walk to the podium with a dignity that seemed impossible given the circumstances. My name is Eleanor Harris, she began, her voice steady and clear. And I am not dead. The room exploded with shouted questions, even more blinding flashes. She waited for silence to return before continuing. For years I lived in fear. Fear of a man who should have protected me but instead threatened me, stalked me, and eventually forced me to take the most difficult decision of my life. Faking my own death was not a choice, it was survival. She spoke for 15 minutes, telling her story without holding back, without glossing anything over. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the most hardened reporters seemed shaken. The questions that followed were brutal. Why didn't you go to the police? Because my husband had police in his pocket. Why not just get a divorce? Because he made it clear divorce meant death, for me and potentially for my son. Don't you think deceiving authorities about your own death is a crime? I think surviving shouldn't be a crime. And I'm willing to face any legal consequences for my actions. But I don't regret having survived. When we left the building, a crowd was waiting. Some supporters holding signs that read "We believe you, Eleanor." Others shouted accusations of fraud and manipulation. Security escorted us to the car. In the back seat, my mother finally let the facade fall. She collapsed into silent sobs, and I held her hand as we drove away from the chaos. It's over, I said. The worst is over. She shook her head. It's not over. The trials will take months, maybe years. It will be brutally public. Every detail of our life will be dissected. But this time you're not alone. This time the truth is on our side. That night the news spoke of nothing else. Legal experts analyzed the case, psychologists discussed trauma and survival, former acquaintances appear to give statements about my father's character. either defending him blindly or crucifying him publicly. I turned off the TV and checked on my son. He slept soundly, clutched to his bear, oblivious to the chaos consuming our family. I straightened his blanket and sat there for a moment, just watching his steady breathing. My wife appeared in the doorway. "You did the right thing," she whispered. "I did the only possible thing." No. Many people in your position would have chosen to ignore it, protect the family name, keep appearances. You chose the truth, even knowing the cost. The cost is still being paid. We don't know how this will end. We know it ends with you free. Free from him, free from the lies. That's already a victory. I returned to the living room and found my mother sitting on the couch, looking out at the dark street. "I can't stop thinking," she said when I sat beside her, "about all the times I almost told the truth and didn't. All the years wasted living in fear. But you survived. And now he will pay." Justice doesn't give back lost time. It doesn't erase trauma. It doesn't bring your grandparents back. No. But it prevents him from destroying more lives. And that has to mean something. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "When all this is over, when the trials end and the cameras move on to the next tragedy, what do? We live. For real this time. Without fear, without lies, without looking over our shoulders. Do you think that's possible? After everything?" "I think we have to try. Because if we don't, he wins anyway." The following 6 months were the hardest and paradoxically the most liberating of my life. My father's trial dragged on for weeks, each day revealing new layers of corruption I had never imagined. Shell companies in tax havens, payments to public officials spanning decades, witnesses finally finding the courage to speak after years silenced by fear. I sat in the gallery every day, forcing myself to look at the man I once called father. He never looked back. Not once. He kept his eyes forward, his face an impassive mask, as if watching a trial for someone else. My mother testified for 3 full days. The defense tried to discredit her, painting her as manipulative, as someone who faked her own death out of greed or mental imbalance. But she stood firm, answering every question with a calm only someone who has walked through hell can have. "Don't you think it's extreme to fake your own death?" the defense attorney asked, his tone condescending. "I think it's extreme to be threatened with death by your own husband," she replied simply. "I think it's extreme to live decades in fear. Faking death was just the final act in a long series of survival." The elderly mechanic who had examined my grandparents' car also testified. His hands trembled as he described how the brakes had been clearly sabotaged, how he was threatened to alter the report. He cried when he apologized to my mother for not having had the courage to speak sooner. "I was young, had a family," he said, his voice breaking. "But that's no excuse. I carried this weight for 20 years, and there isn't a day I don't think about the lives that could have been saved if I had been brave." The accountant who knew about the money laundering schemes brought boxes of documents he had secretly kept for years, his insurance policy in case my father decided to eliminate him as well. The wife of the unjustly fired employee spoke about how they lost everything, almost lost their marriage, how my father's cruelty destroyed not only a career but an entire family. Each witness was a piece of a mosaic of systematic evil. And when the prosecutor finally delivered the closing arguments, there was no doubt in the room about the verdict. 19 counts. Guilty on all. When the judge read the sentence, 40 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 20, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief because justice had been served. Sadness because no sentence would return my grandparents, no prison time could erase the years my mother had lived in terror. My father finally looked at me as the guards took him away. His eyes showed no remorse, only something that resembled contempt. Even defeated, even exposed, he couldn't accept responsibility. And at that moment, I understood that he never would. Men like him do not learn, do not grow, do not change. They only blame the world for failing to bow before them. That was the last time I saw him. The family business collapsed within weeks of the verdict. Partners distanced themselves, investors fled, contracts were cancelled. The empire he spent 30 years building crumbled like a sandcastle at high tide. And honestly, I felt nothing but peace. Charlotte helped me navigate the liquidation of assets. We discovered that my mother was entitled to a significant portion, considering many properties had been purchased with her inheritance. But she only wanted enough to live comfortably, nothing more. I don't want blood-stained money, she said. I want to start fresh with something clean. The rest was divided among my father's victims, restitution ordered by the court. It wasn't enough to undo the damage, but it was something. With my share, and with the freedom to finally pursue my own dreams without the shadow of the family empire, I opened my own architecture studio. Small, focused on sustainable and accessible projects, exactly the opposite of everything my father represented. My first client was a public school in need of renovations, but with a limited budget. I charged only enough to cover costs. "Are you sure about this?" my wife asked when I showed her the contract. "We could take more profitable projects." We could. But it's not about money. It never was. Then what is it about? About building things that help people, not exploit them. About creating a legacy my children can be proud of. My mother found her own way to restart. She bought a small house on the Oregon coast, a wooden cabin with an ocean view and enough land for a garden. She planted daisies, hundreds of them, turning the yard into a white and yellow sea that moved with the wind. She started teaching art to local children, free on Saturdays. She said painting was therapeutic, that creating was the opposite of destruction, and there had been enough destruction in her life. It was time to create. We visited every weekend. My son ran through the daisy garden, laughing the way children do only when they feel completely safe. My mother taught him to mix paints, to see colors where others only saw gray. One day, 6 months after the trial, he asked me while walking along the beach, "Dad, is Grandma a superhero?" I stopped and looked at him, at those curious eyes trying to make sense of a world too complicated even for adults sometimes. "Why do you think that?" "Because she fought the villain and won. Like in the movies." I knelt in the sand to be at his eye level. Do you know what makes someone truly heroic? It's not defeating villains or having superpowers. It's having the courage to do what's right even when you're scared. It's getting up after you fall. It's protecting the ones you love, no matter the cost. So yes, your grandmother is a superhero. The most real one there is. He thought for a moment, then smiled. "You're a hero too then. Because you helped her." We helped each other. That's how it works. Real heroes don't do everything alone. That night, after putting my son to bed, I sat with my wife on the porch. The sea was calm, the sky full of stars we rarely saw in the city. "Do you have regrets?" she asked. "About exposing my father?" "No. Never. But I have regrets about not seeing the signs sooner. About not protecting my mother better." "You were a child." "His child. It wasn't your responsibility." "I know. But I still carry it." "And you probably will forever. But you also carry the certainty that when it mattered, when you had the chance to act, you did. That counts more." 3 months later, I received an unexpected letter. It was from one of my mother's former students, a girl she had taught art to 15 years ago. She had become a professional artist and was holding an exhibition in Portland dedicated to teachers who changed lives. "Your mother saved me," the letter said. "When everyone said I had no future, she gave me paints and told me that the future is something we create, not something given to us. I want to honor her in the exhibition. I want the world to know what an incredible woman she is." I showed the letter to my mother. She cried, but this time tears of joy. "Sometimes we forget," she said, "that our actions echo in ways we never see. That touching a life can create ripples that spread for years. You touched many lives. Including mine." The exhibition was held in a small but elegant gallery. There were paintings from 12 different artists, all former students of my mother, each with a plaque explaining how she had impacted their paths. The stories were diverse, but the theme was consistent. She believed when no one else did. My mother walked through the gallery in silence, stopping at each painting, reading every story. When she reached the last one, she turned to me. "This," she said, her voice emotional, "this is legacy. Not buildings or money or power. Lives touched, hope planted, love shared. This is what remains when everything else falls apart." At that moment, I fully understood. My father had built an empire of concrete and greed that crumbled the moment the truth came to light. But my mother had built something invisible, something in hearts and minds, that no revelation could destroy. On the first anniversary of the day she died, we held a small private ceremony. It wasn't about mourning, but about celebrating rebirth. We planted a tree in her garden, a cherry tree that would bloom every spring, reminding us that even after the harshest winter, beauty returns. What would you say, I asked as we filled the soil around the roots, to someone going through what you went through? Someone trapped, afraid, seeing no way out. She thought carefully before answering. I'd say that surviving isn't weakness. That doing what needs to be done to protect your life and your sanity isn't shameful. The world may judge you for the choices you make under pressure, but only you know the weight you carried when you made them. And justice? Fighting back. I'd say truth has power. Lies may last a long time, but they never last forever. Seeking justice is terrifying and exhausting and can cost you everything you have, but living a lie also costs you, only the payment is in pieces of your soul. We finished planting the tree in silence. My son carefully watered it, focused on his small task as if the tree's future depended entirely on him. And maybe it did. I looked at my mother, the woman who had died and risen, who had lost everything and rebuilt from scratch, who had faced evil and chosen not to become bitter but kind. She was stronger now than ever. Truly free. Thank you, I said. For what? For teaching me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. For showing me that legacy isn't what we build, but how we treat people in the process. For being exactly who you are. She smiled, that smile that lit up everything around her. And thank you for believing. For fighting. For choosing justice even when it meant destroying everything you knew. You are a better man than your father ever dreamed of being. Because I had the best teacher. We sat together in the garden until the sun set, watching the daisies dance in the wind and the young cherry tree take root. Behind us, my wife and son laughed at something, the sound carrying through the air like music. This is the truth I learned through all of it. Monsters exist, sometimes wearing familiar faces and respectable surnames. But heroes exist too, and they rarely wear capes. They use courage when courage seems impossible. They choose truth when lying would be easier. They protect love even when love has already hurt too much. And in the end, when the noise dies down and the dust settles, what remains isn't the empires we build or destroy, but the connections we preserve, the lives we touch, and the peace we find in doing what we knew was right. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with anyone who needs to hear this message of courage and new beginnings.